Today's conversation, the third day, has really brought up the importance of cultural transformation, the courage to change, to let go of familiarity, the status quo. And that takes a lot of people power and collective courage to do. We hold values as materialistic, monetary values. We don't hold cultural, community, environmental values, or even health and well-being of ourselves as a value. And that's why this is not moving fast enough. People aren't willing to travel on this road.
The data can get in the way of our understanding and our taking effective action. And we have these statistics, of places of multiple deprivation, but it's not the place that's deprived, it's people that are living in deprivation. Just like, we aren't trying to eradicate fuel poverty, we're trying to take people out of fuel poverty. Because Scottish citizens aren't numbers, they're not economic units, they're people with or without financial security, with or without hope, with or without agency, skills, health, jobs and opportunity. And there's a common misconception that what we're trying to do is save the planet. And few people, maybe 10, 15% are actually motivated by that. But the planet, nature, will carry on fine regardless of what we do. Species come and go, nature carries on. What we're really trying to do is save our planet as a habitat for our species. What would it be like if we took a public health approach to the climate and biodiversity emergency? You can see how we've made progress when we take a fresh approach to knife crime, for example, or perhaps to drugs. And you can actually, by changing the way we think about things, the paradigm, you can suddenly make much more substantive progress. And how, when we did have a health emergency in the COVID crisis, how we suddenly were able to transform the way we run our society, and we stopped flying in planes, and it highlighted the issues about the importance of nature and of social isolation. And so what if we took that mindset into how we approached the climate and nature crisis? Because it is a health crisis. What is it, 1,000 people a year die because they can't heat their homes? And all the other impacts of mould and social isolation that come with the quality of our homes and the way we design our built environment. And changes in sea levels and rainfall and sunshine, that's going to affect nature as well. And yet nature is such a profound resource in terms of our physical and mental health. And so there's a threat to us there through that. And the way we approach adaptation and nature restoration is also an issue.
I want to talk to you today about the real health impacts that fuel poverty has had and how these compound with other elements of poverty to really, really ruin some people's lives. Last year, 521 people died in Scotland just because they were in a cold house. You extend that to Britain, over 4,000. We bring in the actual effects of mould and damp. You're seeing long-term respiratory conditions. You're seeing issues affecting your eyesight. One of the most shocking recently, someone living in Partick got in touch with us about his house with the Wheatley Corporation, whose mould was so bad his teeth had started to rot. There was a report done by Friends of the Earth that was showing evidence that mould is contributing to children being born with learning difficulties and with stunted growth. If you're living in a house and you are already suffering the physical aspects of it, and then you daily after day have to actually see the mould, see the damp spots, and think about what it's doing to you, having that constant reminder that you are without where others aren't, it's devastating to your mental health.
We always been putting work first, and foremost, I think, before our own well-being. And we haven't changed the system. The economic system needs to change for providing, not based on profit, but based on well-being. So it is possible to change. I guess that's my point. But employers and the system needs to be forced to be changed.
Health and well-being is in crisis across the country in almost every sector. It's not just construction, it's in education, it's in health, it's in everything. And you've seen the brew dogs of this world who are now saying, no, we can't afford to pay the living wage anymore. And that's a real problem. You're seeing the supermarkets putting their prices up 40% a year. And everything's wrapped in plastic now, which is killing your health. So where do you start with health and well-being? It's across the board. It's a national, global crisis. Everything that we do, but it's all about big money. It's about the big money dictates everything, and they make the money, we suffer. It's not just about working conditions for men or women in the construction industry, it's how we react as a society. How do we deal with it?
Yeah, we put on a mental health session at the end of last year because we had one of our surveyors came in and said that one of his colleagues committed suicide out of the blue. And it obviously really shook him. We put that on, it was really well attended, but I spoke to a lot of the older men, because it is predominantly older men in the surveying profession, and they were like, oh, I don't need this. I don't need to talk about my feelings. I'm fine, I'm doing fine. It's a much, much wider problem that just really, really isn't spoken about enough.
Do you think construction's significantly worse than other professions? I suspect it might well be. I mean, I know people are bailing out, and I don't know, it's just a disconnect between the sort of like we're doing arty things on top and we're trying to make money and we're trying to, there's people who are getting their hands on who maybe don't have much agency, who just like, right, get out of my way, I'm just trying to build something. And it just seems to become very aggressive. They kind of say, oh, you've got to be tough to come into this industry. Well, is this an opportunity to make it so that you haven't got to flog your mental health and turn yourself into some sort of Neanderthal to work in the industry to get ahead?
I used to work in a horrendous toxic environment when I lived in London, and when the Gen Z demographic came into the workforce, I just said, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not breaking my back staying hours later for no additional pay. And I thought that was such a breath of fresh air, and it's a complete change of kind of your mindset, their focus on what matters to them, and health and longevity around that is so much more important. The challenge is that you've basically got these two clashing cultures now of managerial level and more senior level just not understanding this new way of working.
The construction industry is far from perfect. It's deadly. It kills over 50 construction workers in the UK every year. 2 construction workers take their lives every single week in construction, and that's not to mention workplace related diseases and all the rest of it. In the built realm, where we are all stakeholders, few had a voice, and we decorated it with monuments of great men. And that legacy still sits heavy in our construction sector and built environment today. And we've been conditioned to think that that's normal, but it's not. Gender equality is normal. Patriarchy, gender inequality is weird. The workforce percentage itself isn't the problem, it's a symptom of the problem, which is the anti-human culture within construction, which has a high stress culture of not valuing people and excessive competition that regulates physical safety but not mental well-being. The most common cause of death for men under 30 is death by suicide, and for men in construction it's 3 times worse. Why is that? Construction may be excluding women, but it's killing men. The lack of gender diversity and the suicide of young men are symptoms of the same problem, one of patriarchal culture. And you can kind of add damage to nature to the same cultural problem. And across all these events then, we've got 84 women and 85 men. So thank God we're normal.
Today we seen the wee graph to put how many women work in the industry. A young lady says to me, she thought it was 11% at the moment. But that 11%, probably about 9.5% of them work in the office environment. And what we call out in the park, so building, actual building stuff, it's about 1.1%. So there's hardly any women out there working in the industry. And one of the reasons behind that is because of the male chauvinism and the harassment. Over the pandemic, I was dealing with hundreds of women in the offices who were being harassed and bullied by their male colleagues, and that's embarrassing. So if we're going to move towards net zero, we need to address the other issues with the industry.
From the year 2012 to the year 22, we are noticing an increase of women coming into the construction sector. So in a sense, there's something we are doing which is right, I believe. The part of the reason has been the pandemic brought a tectonic shift in the way we were working, and there were elements of flexible working that got introduced in almost the most rigid kind of workplaces, and that's actually been the reason why women have kind of started accessing opportunities in this space more. Now we look at the kind of detailed numbers. What we'll see is just 1% of skilled tradespeople in construction are women. So where are the women going? 81% of administrative and secretarial roles are being held by women. Now we see where the women are going.
Where we are with women in property and construction at the moment is not as good as we could be. I'd say that things are getting better and we are creating a more inclusive environment. However, we're not quite there yet, and there's a lot more that we can do. And I think by just going back to what I was saying, by increasing the awareness and showing that women, men, anyone can do what they want as long as they put their mind to it. So it's about increasing that awareness and just not making it a big thing, that it just becomes the norm.
When we talk about progressing women across STEM pipelines, including the construction sector, there is a concept called leaky pipeline, which basically indicates that between year 5 and 6 of their tenure in that particular career track, women tend to leave. Now, I would like to shift that narrative. I would say women don't tend to leave. There's a gender filter which prevents women from progressing, and that's why they drop out and kind of move on to other professions.
I'm a young female in the construction, so this topic is quite relevant to me. So kind of how do I personally stay in the industry, and what would have to change or maybe improve for that to happen? And I think, kind of conversations on mental health and well-being is at the key of that, because if we don't feel great ourselves, we can't deliver good environment for other people. It's as simple as that.
Who are these progressive employers? Have we got some examples of how they're giving people agency?
There's a construction company in Edinburgh, I think, have shifted to a 4-day week for all employees. You immediately create a structure that is more open to more people by having a slightly more flexible working arrangement.
The key thing is women are less vested in the existing culture of construction and the existing status quo, so they're more able to deliver change. We should put women into positions of power precisely because they'll make a faster job of delivering the just transition. This thing of having a vision of where we want to get to, this better place, it's construction as a place for everyone, women in positions of power, a sector that young people want to work in because it's part of a positive, healthy, fulfilling, vocational future. And we'll only get that outcome if we change what we're doing at the moment, because that's not where we're headed. The future is diversity, the future is female, the future is youth. We just need to open the door and make those pathways.
Transition and gender equality. It matters not only for a sense of justice and equity, but also in terms of innovation. Diverse workforces, diverse companies show better and greater gains in terms of innovation, and We need innovation if we're going to achieve our net zero targets. And the more women that we have employed, the better the outcomes for the economy. Of course, we need to support people into choosing good careers and to finding their pathways. You can't be what you can't see. But it's not only on the women to make this transition equitable and fair and gender inclusive.
What one change do you think you can make? I'd love to hear more. I'm just going to share this again and open it up for your comments. Speak truth to power. Love it. Absolutely. Learn to say no to those stupid tasks that you always get given. So, oh, women's toilets. Yeah. Parental leave. Yeah. The faster that we see it as a responsibility of both parents, not just the mum. Diverse groups of people into bad jobs. I love that. Yeah. Equal pay. Yes, that would be really helpful. Yes. Cleaning in offices is a really interesting touch point. Maternity leave for female apprentices. Definitely. That's a really interesting idea about changing your leadership to ensure gender balance and inclusive leadership. Yeah, female PPE that isn't just pink it and shrink it. Wow, you're absolutely burning up here. This is fantastic.
Having a flexible working arrangement that might allow more agency, more opportunities for people of different backgrounds as well, for instance women, to move into the construction industry.
The infrastructure and support isn't there in the workplace for women who want to have a kid.
There has been a lack of community development. Community spaces are losing their funding or they're not being built in the first place. So there's these huge new communities that don't have any facilities, which then obviously has knock-on effects for people's health and well-being. Living in those areas, increased isolation.
Scotland at the moment is sadly experiencing a worsening in life expectancy and healthy life expectancy. The net zero and low carbon future has the potential to improve health and simultaneously reduce inequality. But it can only do that if it's a sort of just transition. And I mean, we've seen the impact that trying to implement low carbon policy on communities that have the resources to absorb it has had in London, and if we're not careful that will be just replicated where people are then disengaged and disenfranchised, and there's then obviously been the outcome that there's been less attention and commitment.
We talked a lot about the gender gap. We didn't talk about monetary gap. We didn't talk about a lot of other gaps.
I think location factors into opportunity quite a lot. Remote and rural areas don't have the same access to training.
I think the other thing is, who's being taught this stuff? Is it mostly middle-class professionals or not? And suddenly do all the people who've been doing all the jobs up till now suddenly feel like they're not in a position to do it?
The more equal society becomes in all directions, that would make a lot more things accessible, I think.